Council met, and the Prime Minister announced that Eastern Nigeria would now begin to export crude oil, which made significant resource flows. And in those days, if you remember, the subnational government was the receiving one, and maybe 50% went up to the federal government. That the Premier of the North took off to Kaduna, got there, was looking very excited, he immediately called for a cabinet meeting, and people wondered what he was excited about. He said, look, today it was announced that Eastern region will begin to export crude oil. I said, yes, but why are you excited about this? It's Eastern region that will make the money. He said, you don't understand. As they begin to export crude oil, they will not be able to have any farming anymore. They will be quarreling over the revenues, and we will need to start an agriculture policy that will enable us to feed them and take all the money from them. This fact, fable, or whatever, but it illustrates the fact that sometimes the bitterness over who is getting our money or their money defeats the real conversation that should be going on how we govern. So, the challenge should really be, why does Nigeria not work? A good part of the impunity that goes in the system that prevents the principles from making things happen as they should happen comes from a perception that you can essentially profit from using power to get a greater share of the resources to yourself. And this has not been proven in any way. And we can take a number of examples. State creation. People say that if we create more states, we will bring government closer to the people. Makes sense, it's logical, but what have we done? What we have just created is an opportunity for elite to create ways of abusing the resources of the state for themselves as politicians. More state governors, more motorcades, and so on and so forth. Western region ran from Lagos here all the way through to Asaba. In the 60s, 12 ministers or so ran all of these places. Today, we have what? 8, 9 states from Lagos to Asaba. Many governors, many commissioners. In fact, some, all they do is just appoint anybody they see on the streets. And so we have a system where we now have so much, but so little development taking place. A lot more was done with those 12 ministers than we're doing with all these commissioners and advisors and all of that. What we have done is create elite velvet ghettos. A government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians. And our federation must deal frontally with that as the central issue. We talked about local governments. We multiply local governments everywhere. And this principle of subsidiarity, which Osage also referred to, which is so critical because it is closest, it touches the people. What has happened? Local governments are completely ineffective in the country. My idea of local governments, and that's why when people say local government, my preferred place in government is in local government administration. When we get the retiring generals, the retiring permanent secretaries, the academics to go in and become the local government officials, then local governments will be able to take advantage of the know-how and know why they've built up through time, and it can work for the people. Right now, local government is not working for the people. It's a bloody waste of resources. And then, of course, one of the things that's happened as part of this way of seeing the federal structure is that we have created all kinds of parallel agencies. I think Shegu Adeniyi gave some interesting examples of the agencies upon agencies upon agencies that we are creating. And this has just become a drain pipe, parastatal's frenzy. What we need to talk more about is that we need trim governments that are delivering, that are accountable, and not just parastatals that are created, and most people don't even know they exist, but we are being drained of resources. I don't know, but I'm sure that if you go into the budget, you'll probably find some allocation for DFRI somewhere, or some agencies that died. We don't have sunset laws in Nigeria. So once you create an agency, that agency just goes on and continues to function. And even if it's long dead, some allocation is going to it, and it continues to be a drain on the national. And the challenge of not asking ourselves what our governmental structures contribute. Anytime I hear this debate about whether the National Assembly is transparent, opaque, how much are they getting, I really feel sad. I feel sad because a politician who does not know that the ultimate responsibility is accounting to people. I mean, look at what price the U.S. Health Secretary is going through about use of public resources. But how many of you last saw a governor on a flight going anywhere? Everybody's flying around in private jets. We have a National Assembly. We're not quite sure whether it's small or big, but we're not sure how much of our resources go. Now, politicians should be the ones that do the most to hold others accountable. But because political parties are not functional, because civil society is not as strong as it should be, these issues are not entering public conversation, and they become problems that we must deal with. I think that today, what we must begin to focus on is how a crush culture of honest public conversation has made it easy to deny the people their role and made an integrity deficit system one that has become a hallmark of national character. We must begin to say and ask questions. How come we can't deal with issues that have been thrown up in this way? So, a few things that baffle about the nature of our system. For example, the puzzle of mindless corruption. I mean, I think most Nigerians have, I don't know, a bigger buffer for taking these things. I sometimes read the headlines, and I ban people from showing me a newspaper for days. Is it possible that somebody can actually take that kind of money out of, well, is it a psychiatric problem? No. I really need to, is it a psychiatric problem? Okay, anybody who does that to a system, possibly it's a psychiatric problem, I don't know. Is this system-induced greed? Maybe it is. Or is it just that the way we see life, this zero-sum mindset, that if somebody gets, I lose, leads to a culture in which just take everything so that nobody else will get something. Because if they get something, it means I'm losing something. These all come down to the challenge of leadership. So how do we lead in this kind? I thought, I said to Osage just before he began to speak, Osage, remind me, did Peter Eke teach you? He said, yes, of course. As an undergraduate, supervised his master's thesis and even his PhD thesis. There was a time when political science in Nigeria made a huge contribution to global thinking, thesis in political science as civic culture, from the work of a University of Ibadan professor who, again, one of the tragedies of Nigeria, has not been living in Nigeria for more than a quarter of a century. His name is Peter Eke. Now, Peter Eke, many years ago, wrote a seminar article on civic culture, which was generally known as the two publics, in which Peter Eke showed how a Nigerian, at the level of his, say, village association meeting, would not dare tamper with the fund, but at the level of the federal government can take away everything that is there and go to his village and be celebrated. In the sense that the civic cultures in which we are playing are such that the levels of both commitment, accountability, and all of that are different in these areas. Now, what can take care of this? Obviously, it is the terrain of leadership to build ownership. Now, part of all of this is that we have created a society that the world watches and is sometimes amazed by. Several